Femi always sat at the back of the class, not by choice, but by consequence. Every time he tried to sit near the front, someone would whisper, "That's not your seat," and nudge him toward the last row. At Mbagba Grammar School, where strength and speed earned more respect than intelligence, Femi was at the bottom of the food chain. He struggled to keep up in class. Words on the chalkboard danced before his eyes. Letters flipped, numbers reversed, and by the time he blinked back to focus, the teacher had already moved on. "Lazy boy," Mr. Mbagba said one morning after returning another failed test paper. The class erupted into low chuckles. Femi kept his head down, feeling the heat rise to his cheeks. He wasn't lazy. He tried, he really did. He stayed up late staring at textbooks until his eyes watered. He copied notes word for word, even if he didn't understand them. But none of it seemed to help. His mother, a petty trader at the Oak Odo market, often scolded him too. "Your mates are bringing home prizes. You're bringing home red ink," she'd hiss, pressing her fingers to her temples in frustration. Femi didn't blame her. She worked hard to keep him in school. He just wished someone would believe him when he said he wasn't stupid. The school had recently welcomed a new English teacher, Miss Teo, a young woman fresh out of university with bright eyes and a warm presence. On her first day, she walked into class with a stack of books and a calm confidence that silenced the usual chatter. Femi barely looked up, expecting more of the same, quick lectures, quicker anger, and the inevitable look of disappointment when he failed to keep up. But Miss Teo was different. When she handed back the first set of assignments, she paused beside Femi's desk. She didn't scold. Instead, she knelt slightly and whispered, "Do you mind if we talk after class?" Her voice was soft, her smile sincere. Femi nodded hesitantly, unsure what to expect. After the bell rang, while his classmates rushed out laughing and pushing, Femi stayed behind. Miss Teo pulled a chair close and looked at his notebook. The pages were messy, letters uneven, words jumbled. But there was effort. She saw it. "Femi, have you ever heard of dyslexia?" she asked. Femi blinked. "What's that?" She explained gently, describing how some students see letters differently, how their brains process words in unique ways. "It doesn't mean you're not smart. It just means we need to find how you learn best." For the first time, someone wasn't calling him lazy or dull. Someone was trying to understand. That night, Femi lay awake thinking about what Miss Teo had said. Dyslexia. A strange word, but it echoed in his mind like a drumbeat. Could that really be the reason behind his struggles? Could there be a name for the shame he had carried for years? He replayed her voice in his head, calm and kind. He imagined what it would be like to read a page without confusion, to write without fear. The next day, Miss Teo met him at the library after school. She had printed out special reading exercises, colorful and large font pages that didn't feel like normal textbooks. They read aloud together. She didn't rush him or sigh when he paused. She waited, encouraged, corrected gently. It felt strange, like learning was no longer a battle but a puzzle that could actually be solved. Femi improved slowly, but surely. In class, his answers became more confident. He still made mistakes, but now he asked questions. Miss Teo began to notice the spark behind his eyes, the curiosity, the intelligence long buried under years of ridicule. She decided to talk to the principal about getting a professional assessment for Femi. It was a long shot, considering the school's limited resources, but she believed he deserved it. The principal, Mr. Ogunlade, was skeptical when Miss Teo brought up dyslexia. Dyslexia? In this school? We don't have money for such things, he muttered, adjusting his glasses. But Miss Teo, persistent and firm, offered to conduct further observations herself. She brought research materials, showed examples, and even volunteered extra hours to help Femi and other struggling students. Meanwhile, Femi's classmates remained unaware of his private sessions. He preferred it that way. Still, rumors began to spread. Why is Femi always with Miss Teo? Some students whispered. Others mocked, he's finally trying to bribe his way to pass English. The taunts hurt, but Femi kept his focus. Something had shifted in him. Each successful reading gave him a thrill. Each word he could pronounce felt like a small victory. One afternoon, Miss Teo asked Femi to write a short story. He hesitated, fearing the chaos that might spill onto the page. But she insisted. He wrote slowly, sounding out words, crossing out mistakes, trying again. When he finished, she read it and smiled. "You have a voice, Femi. Don't let anyone silence it." The school term ended with the usual flurry of exam results. Students clustered around the notice board, cheering or groaning. Femi lingered at the back, heart thudding. When he finally approached the board, he scanned the list and found his name. English, 57%. It wasn't the highest, but it was the first time he had passed the subject. He stared at the number, barely believing it. For years, his grades had been a sea of red ink and failing marks. This time, a single red circle around a passing grade made his eyes well up. He didn't notice Miss Teo behind him until she said softly, "I knew you could do it." Femi turned to her, unable to speak. He just nodded, overwhelmed. That evening, he showed the result to his mother. She looked at it, then at him, her expression unreadable. "You passed?" she asked, voice low. "Yes, Mama. I passed." She hugged him, tightly and wordlessly. For the first time in years, she didn't scold. She smiled. With his confidence growing, Femi began visiting the school library more often. It was a dusty place with missing shelves and outdated books, but to him, it was sacred. Miss Teo got special permission for Femi to use it during lunch breaks and after school. She even convinced the principal to order a few newer reading materials. In that quiet room, Femi discovered his sanctuary. There was something calming about being surrounded by words, even if they still danced on the page. He practiced his reading skills daily, slowly getting better. Sometimes he read aloud to himself, carefully pronouncing each word. One day, he found an old book about famous Nigerians who had overcome learning challenges. He read about a musician who couldn't read music notes but composed timeless songs. He read about a mathematician who struggled with spelling but was a genius with numbers. It lit a fire in him. He wasn't alone. He wasn't broken. Femi started helping another student, Ada, who struggled with reading too. They sat in the library corner and practiced together. Miss Teo noticed and smiled. "That's leadership, Femi," she said. After weeks of persistent lobbying by Miss Teo, the school finally invited a specialist from the state education board. It was the first time a professional had visited Mbagba Grammar School for something unrelated to inspection or punishment. Dr. Olakunle, a soft-spoken man with glasses too big for his face, arrived on a Monday morning. He spent time with Femi, giving him exercises, asking him questions, observing his reading. When the session ended, Dr. Olakunle nodded slowly. "Yes, this boy shows clear signs of dyslexia," he said. The confirmation felt like a key unlocking a heavy door. Femi wasn't imagining things. There was a name for his struggle. It wasn't a curse, it was a condition, and one that could be managed. Dr. Olakunle left behind pamphlets and simple techniques for classroom teachers to use. Miss Teo immediately incorporated them into her lessons. Femi felt a shift not just in how he learned, but in how he saw himself. He no longer felt broken. He felt understood. The school, slow as it was to adapt, began to take small steps. The principal allowed for longer reading times for students like Femi. A few teachers resisted, muttering about special treatment, but Miss Teo stood firm. Femi wasn't asking for pity. He just wanted a fair chance. That night, Femi wrote a journal entry for the first time. The words weren't perfect. The spelling was clumsy. But every word was his. Femi and Ada continued to study together after school. Their friendship grew over shared pages and whispered encouragements. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows over the library tables, Ada hesitated before speaking. "Femi, I think I have what you have," she said quietly. He looked at her, surprised. She had always been shy, but he hadn't realized she struggled with reading too. "Dyslexia?" he asked. She nodded. "Words confuse me. Numbers too. I thought I was just dumb." Femi reached across the table and touched her hand lightly. "You're not dumb. You're just like me." Ada smiled, eyes shining with relief. For the first time, she wasn't hiding. They began working together more seriously, forming their own little reading club. They even helped two younger students who joined in after overhearing them. What began as private support became a ripple of change. Miss Teo noticed and started planning group sessions for all struggling readers. Femi and Ada helped design the reading games. It was the first time students looked to Femi for guidance. He wasn't just the boy at the back anymore. He was becoming a leader. The school announced that a student would be chosen to speak at the end-of-term assembly. It was meant to inspire others, to reflect on personal growth. Miss Teo nominated Femi. When she told him, his eyes widened. "Me? Yes, you. You've come so far, and others need to hear it." He hesitated for days, unsure if he could face the entire school. What if he stammered? What if the words refused to come? But with Ada's encouragement and Miss Teo's help, he wrote a speech. It wasn't fancy. It was simple, raw, and true. On the day of the assembly, Femi stepped onto the stage, heart pounding. The hall was silent. He took a breath and began. He spoke about how he used to feel stupid. How he now knew it was dyslexia. He talked about Miss Teo, the library, Ada, and learning to believe in himself. When he finished, there was silence for a heartbeat, then loud applause. Even Mr. Mbagba clapped, nodding slowly. Femi walked off the stage, his knees trembling, but his heart full. He had spoken and people had listened. After the assembly, more students approached Femi, asking for help, sharing their struggles. Teachers started to take notice. The principal even asked Femi to assist during junior classes as a peer mentor. It was new territory for him, but he embraced it. Meanwhile, his mother, seeing his growing confidence, stopped comparing him to others. She even attended a school event for the first time, proud to see her son speak in front of a crowd. "Oh mommy," she whispered afterward, holding his face. "I didn't know you were this brave." At night, Femi dreamed not of failure, but of possibility. He imagined starting a place where students like him could learn without fear. A center for kids with learning differences, a place filled with color, creativity, and patience. Just as Femi's world began to bloom, the news struck like lightning: Miss Teo was being transferred. It came with no warning. The state education board had reassigned her to a rural school in Ijebu, citing the need for qualified teachers in underserved areas. The announcement came during the morning assembly, and when Femi heard her name, his heart sank. After school, he rushed to find her. She was packing up books in the staff room, her expression calm but tired. "I didn't want to leave, Femi," she said softly. "But I have no choice." Femi blinked back tears. "What about the reading club? What about everything we've built?" She knelt and took his hand. "That's exactly why I'm leaving with peace in my heart. Because I know you'll keep it going. You're ready." As Miss Teo's departure day approached, the school held a small farewell. Femi gave her a handmade card signed by all the students she'd helped. They hugged tightly, and she whispered, "Your story isn't finished. Don't stop turning the pages." Without Miss Teo, the reading club faltered. Other teachers lacked her patience and insight. The new English teacher, Mr. Dada, was stern and formal. He dismissed the idea of special needs as a Western invention. Every student must learn the same way, he barked. Femi felt the progress slipping away. Ada struggled again and grew quiet. The two younger students stopped attending sessions. The library fell silent. For the first time in months, Femi felt helpless. He tried to advocate for the group but was shut down. "Face your books," Mr. Dada snapped. "This isn't a charity." He met Ada after school and whispered, "Let's restart the club." Outside school. In the community. Ada hesitated, then entheated slowly. "Let's do it." Femi and Ada began meeting under a mango tree behind Femi's compound. They spread mats and invited the two younger students again. Slowly, the reading club was reborn, this time beyond the walls of the school. At first, it was awkward. They had no proper materials, no supervision, no one to guide them. But what they did have was heart. Femi copied reading exercises from old books. Ada brought songs and word games. Neighbors passed by, curious. Some laughed, others nodded approvingly. One evening, a boy named Sun Kanmi came by. He was a dropout from the school, known for being restless and unruly. "You think this thing will help people like me?" he asked. Femi looked him straight in the eye. "Yes. If you want to try." Sun Kanmi stayed. And slowly, more children came. It wasn't perfect. There were days when no one showed up. Days when rain soaked their books. Days when Femi doubted himself. But then he'd remember Miss Teyo's words, "Your story isn't finished." One hot afternoon, as Femi helped Ada rearrange the mats, a car pulled up slowly on the sandy path. It was an old Toyota Corolla, coated in road dust. The door opened and to their shock, Miss Teyo stepped out. Femi dropped the books in his hands. "Miss Teyo." She smiled. "I had to see it for myself." She had heard whispers through her old contacts at the school. A dyslexic student turned peer leader. A reading club under a mango tree. She couldn't resist. She sat with them for hours, watching, coaching, laughing. Before she left, she handed Femi an envelope. Inside were laminated cards, colorful phonics guides, and a small donation from friends she'd told their story to. "You've started something special," she said. "And this time, no one can take it away from you." With renewed energy and Miss Teyo's materials in hand, the reading club blossomed. Under the mango tree, children gathered daily. Femi began to feel something he had never felt before: purpose. He wasn't just learning, he was teaching, building something that mattered. Word spread quickly through the community. Parents began stopping by, curious. Some even dropped off and used notebooks, pencils, and water bottles for the children. One elderly woman, Mama Folake, donated her broken bench and told Femi to fix it and let the children sit like scholars. Femi began keeping records: names, reading levels, progress. He created his own makeshift curriculum, drawing inspiration from Miss Teyo's notes. Ada kept spirits high with storytelling and songs. Together, they were building more than a club, they were building a safe haven. Despite their progress, challenges remained. Rainy days ruined books, and sometimes the noise of nearby mechanics drowned out their voices. But the children kept returning. They came barefoot, hungry, tired yet ready to learn. One evening, as the sun painted the sky orange, Femi sat back and watched the group reciting sounds and clapping in rhythm. He allowed himself to believe that maybe his dream of a learning center wasn't so far away. He whispered to Ada, "We can do more. Maybe not now. But one day, we'll build a real center with a roof and chairs and shelves." Ada smiled, her eyes shining. "And we'll call it what?" Femi looked at the children laughing in the dirt. "Grace Center." Femi also began keeping a journal chronicling every success, every challenge, every child's story. He didn't know it yet, but those notes would become the blueprint for something bigger. And then, one Saturday, something unexpected happened. A woman in a blue suit and sunglasses stepped out of a tinted vehicle and watched silently as Femi taught phonics under a tree. When the lesson ended, she walked up and said, "My name is Mrs. McKean. I work with the Ministry of Youth and Education. I'd like to know more about what you're doing here." Mrs. McKean returned the next week, clipboard in hand, questions on her lips. She asked about the reading methods, the children's progress, and where Femi had learned to teach. She spoke briefly to Ada, to son Canmy, even to Mama Folake. Finally, she said, "You're young, but what you've done here is remarkable. I have contacts with a local NGO that supports grassroots learning projects. If you're willing, I can recommend you for a pilot support program." Within 2 weeks, she returned with representatives from the NGO, Childlight Africa. They watched a session, took pictures, and asked more questions. By the end of the month, they donated a tarpaulin tent, a whiteboard, and plastic chairs. Femi and Ada cried quietly the day the tent was set up. It wasn't the full learning center yet. But it was a beginning. He named it officially, Grace Learning Tent. Femi introduced Reading Saturdays, a weekly program that included storytelling competitions, spelling bees, and poetry readings. Ada taught songs that turned complex words into fun rhymes. Son Canmy, once seen as a dropout, now coordinated attendance and discipline. He even asked Femi, shyly, to teach him how to read. The tent was far from perfect. There were days the chairs broke or the whiteboard fell in the wind. Still, the children came. They came with curiosity, with laughter, with hunger for knowledge and belonging. Whispers of jealousy circled the school staff room. Mr. Dada openly mocked the initiative during class. Reading tent? Nonsense. Watch how fast it collapses. But Femi paid no attention. He had learned that change never came without resistance. And the ripples he and Ada had started were becoming waves. One morning, he arrived to find a group of parents waiting. One father stepped forward. "We want to help. We will donate roofing sheets and wood. This tent deserves a permanent shelter." Femi's voice trembled. "Thank you, sir. You don't know what this means." The donated materials arrived in tricycles and wheelbarrows. Children helped pile them behind Mama Folake's house. Excitement buzzed through the air, until the first challenge hit. No one knew how to build a proper structure. But help came from an unexpected source. Son Canmy introduced them to his uncle, Baba Kazim, a retired carpenter. "He used to build classrooms in the old days," Son Canmy said. Baba Kazim arrived in his worn cap and faded wrapper. After inspecting the site, he declared, "I'll help you. But you must also learn. Knowledge should not die with old men." So Femi, Ada, and even Son Canmy began learning how to measure, saw, and nail. It was hard work. Their hands blistered, and the sun showed no mercy. During the process, Femi had doubts. Could he really turn this tent into a learning center? Was he dreaming too big? Every time a plank fell or a nail bent, the doubts returned. By the end of the month, the skeletal frame of a wooden classroom stood proudly behind the mango tree. Just as everything seemed to be coming together, life threw another curve. Ada stopped showing up. At first, Femi assumed she was sick. But after 3 days with no word, he walked to her house. Her mother opened the door, her face tight. "She's gone to Lagos," she said. "Her uncle took her. He says she'll work as a housemaid. We need the money." Femi stood frozen. "But school? The center?" The woman shrugged. "You think stories put food on our table?" He left, numb. Without Ada, the reading tent felt hollow. Her laughter, her songs, her quiet strength, gone. Sunkanmi tried to step in, but the sessions weren't the same. The children noticed. The joy dimmed. That night, Femi sat with his journal, staring at the unfinished lesson plan. Then he flipped to a blank page and wrote a letter. To Ada, you're the heart of Grace Center. I don't know what Lagos is like, but I hope you're safe. I promise to keep this dream alive, for both of us. And one day, I'll find a way to bring you back. Your friend, Femi. Femi threw himself into the center. Each day without Ada was harder than the last, but he pushed through. He used her old games, her songs, her methods. The children still laughed, but something was missing, a softness, a spark. The wooden classroom was completed, painted with leftover whitewash. The words Grace Center were painted in bold red letters above the entrance. Parents donated curtains and mats. Even Mr. Agbage, the school headmaster, sent word through a PTA member, tell the boy he's doing well. One afternoon, while sorting donated books, he found her favorite fairy tale collection. A letter slipped out from inside. It was Ada's handwriting. Femi, they won't let me write often, but I miss you. I miss the kids. I miss learning. Lagos is hard, but I remember the songs. I still sing them. One day, I'll be back. Don't give up. Ada. As Grace Center grew, a local radio station caught wind of Femi's story. One hot Tuesday morning, a silver van pulled into the compound with a reporter and a microphone. You're Femi, right? The woman asked, adjusting her recorder. The boy who built a school under a mango tree. Femi nodded, nervous but excited. The reporter walked around the site, speaking to children and parents, recording their testimonials. The radio interview aired 2 days later on Voice of the People FM. Femi's story became a talking point in Mbagba. People who had never visited stopped by to see the center. Donations trickled in books, chalk, even a small solar lantern from a local NGO. Then, something incredible happened. The Ministry of Education invited Femi to Abuja to speak at a youth conference on community education. They offered to pay his transport and accommodation. Femi had never left Ogun State before. He stood at the gate of Grace Center, heart pounding, ticket in hand. I'm doing this, he whispered. For Ada. For all of us. The capital city was a blur of lights, order, and towering buildings. Femi sat nervously at the back of the conference hall, wide-eyed. The other speakers were older graduates, professionals, founders. He felt out of place in his borrowed shirt and scuffed shoes. When his name was called, he walked to the podium with shaking hands. He told his story. About being laughed at for his reading. About Miss Teo. About the tent. About Ada. He ended with, there are children everywhere who feel like they're not smart. But sometimes, all they need is someone to believe in them. I was that child. And now I help them believe too. The hall erupted in applause. Afterward, several people approached him, NGO reps, donors, and even a journalist from an international education blog. In his hotel room that night, he wrote one more letter. To Ada, Abuja is a different world. But I keep thinking, what if you were here too? One day, I hope we'll share this stage together. Femi. Returning to Mbagba from Abuja felt surreal. The children greeted Femi with cheers, waving handmade signs that read "Welcome Teacher Femi." Sunkanmi ran up and hugged him awkwardly, pretending not to wipe his eyes. Femi brought stories and pictures from the conference. He showed the children photos of other young people doing great things across Nigeria. You see, he told them, we are not small. We are part of something big. One businessman who gave Femi his card, Mr. Kuti, called the next week. He had connections with donors interested in grassroots learning centers. We'll start small, he said. But I want you to design a model. Something we can replicate. Femi worked late into the nights. Drawing plans, outlining methods, adapting lessons. He called it the Grace Learning Model, a framework for creating inclusive, low-cost learning spaces in underserved areas. Meanwhile, the Grace Center in Mbagba received a facelift. With fresh funding, they built a second classroom, a reading nook with cushions, and a rainproof roof. But Femi never forgot the heart of it all, Ada. He read her letters every week. And then, one day, a call came from an unknown number. "Hello?" Femi answered. A familiar voice trembled through the line. "Femi. It's me. I'm coming home." The day Ada returned to Mbagba, it rained heavily. But that didn't stop the children, nor the parents, from gathering at the Grace Center. Holding umbrellas and banana leaves, waiting. A rickety bus pulled up. Ada stepped down, thinner but radiant. Her mother stood nearby, ashamed. Ada walked straight into Femi's arms. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You have nothing to be sorry for," he replied. Ada resumed teaching as if she'd never stopped. She was gentler now, more grounded, and with a deep hunger to do more. Femi noticed the way the children flocked to her, clinging to her skirts, laughing again. That evening, they sat under the mango tree. Femi looked at her, hesitant. "While you were gone, I missed more than your teaching." Ada met his gaze. "Me too." For the first time, he reached for her hand and she didn't let go. Weeks passed, and Ada's presence brought new life to Grace Center. The pilot project with Mr. Cootie's team expanded first to a neighboring village, then another. Femi and Ada spent weekends training local youth, sharing the Grace Learning Model. One quiet Sunday evening, under the mango tree where it all began, Femi spread out an old notebook and showed Ada a page. On it was a new plan, Grace Academy, a permanent school, with boarding for students with learning difficulties. "I want us to build this together," he said. "And I want you by my side, not just in the classroom." Ada blinked. "Femi, are you asking what I think you're asking?" He smiled nervously and pulled a simple ring from his pocket. "Will you be my partner in every way?" Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded. "Yes. Yes, Femi." They embraced, surrounded by the laughter of children peeking from behind doors, giggling. That night, the stars over Mbagba seemed to shine brighter. Hope, once buried in shame and struggle, now bloomed in love, purpose, and promise.
2 weeks after Ada accepted his proposal, Femi received a brown envelope from the Ministry of Education. Inside was a congratulatory letter. He had been awarded a full scholarship to attend a teacher training college in Abeokuta. He read it 3 times before he could breathe. Ada sat beside him, reading over his shoulder, her face slowly breaking into a proud, teary smile. "This is everything, Femi," she whispered. "You've earned it." The scholarship covered tuition, accommodation, and a stipend. But it came with a cost. He would need to attend classes in Abeokuta full-time for 1 year. Femi struggled with the decision. "What happens to the center if I go?" he asked Ada and son Kanmi. "What happens to all of you?" "We keep it running," Ada said firmly. "You've trained us. We'll hold it down until you come back even stronger." Life at the training college was a world away from Mbagba. Femi shared a dorm room with 2 other scholarship students and attended lectures on pedagogy, curriculum design, and inclusive education. For the first few weeks, he felt overwhelmed. The city was loud, fast, and filled with students who spoke fluent English and used big words. Femi doubted himself daily. But then he found a support group for students with learning difficulties. One evening, during a session on neurodivergent teaching strategies, he stood up and shared his story. When he finished, the room was silent until it erupted in applause. "You should lead a workshop," the facilitator said. "You're living proof of what's possible."
Femi grew into his role. He brought a new perspective to class discussions. Professors noticed him. His passion and first-hand experience made him a standout student. He called Ada every evening, sharing what he learned. She updated him on Grace Center's progress, how Sun Kanmi was now leading evening classes, and how more girls were joining the program. Femi realized something else: if he wanted to grow the dream, he needed help. Real, trained help. So he pitched a bold idea to his professor: can my final project be about building a sustainable teacher training program for rural educators? The professor leaned back, impressed. Femi, that's bigger than a final project. That's a legacy. Femi smiled. Then that's what I want to build. Femi's final months at college moved quickly. He poured his heart into his project, the Grace Model, community-led education for rural Africa. Professors praised its originality and depth, especially the chapter on how dyslexia-informed teaching could transform low-performing communities. By graduation day, Femi had earned not just his certificate, but respect. He was offered a post as a part-time trainer at the college, but he declined. His place was back in Mbagba. Ada traveled to Abeokuta to attend the ceremony. She wore a simple Ankara dress and carried a camera the children had pooled to buy from a local shop. "We want to see Teacher Femi in his graduate gown," they had said. When he walked across the stage, receiving his certificate, Ada captured the moment. Afterward, as they stood beneath the jacaranda trees on campus, she turned to him with teary eyes. "You did it, Femi. You're not the boy who couldn't read anymore. You're the man who's teaching others to believe." Femi's return to Mbagba was celebrated like a festival. The streets buzzed. The center was decorated with colored chalk and cloth. A sign hung on the gate: "Welcome home, our champion." The children gathered around him, each one sharing how they'd grown. Sun Kanmi had written his own storybook, and one of the girls, Amina, could now recite poetry in both Yoruba and English. Femi walked through the classrooms with new posters, better benches, and more students than ever. Ada had truly kept the flame alive. He hugged her, overwhelmed. In the months that followed, Grace Center became the heart of something bigger. With support from his college and Mr. Cootie's foundation, Femi launched the Grace Fellows program, a training scheme for passionate young people who wanted to teach but lacked formal qualifications. Ada became the program coordinator. Sun Kanmi helped with mentoring, and Grace Center became a hub for change. One of the fellows, a quiet girl named Kihine from a nearby village, had never spoken in front of a crowd. But after 3 weeks in the program, she stood before her peers and confidently taught a class on phonics. "This is what it's about," Femi told the crowd. Transformation. Not just in books, but in hearts. A surprise came from Abeokuta. One of Femi's former professors had submitted his project to an international foundation. And Grace Center was shortlisted for a $10,000 community impact grant. But just as things were rising, a message arrived. The land Grace Center stood on, loaned long ago by a kind farmer, was now being claimed by his children. They wanted to sell. Femi felt the ground shift beneath him. He had to act fast or everything they had built might be lost. Femi stood beneath the baobab tree, watching children run barefoot across the dusty yard of the Grace Center. Their laughter echoed against the hills, and the scent of roasting maize drifted from a nearby stall. The future he once feared now played joyfully before him. The land crisis had sparked something powerful. After the villagers rallied, a retired chief donated a large piece of land on the edge of the community, land no one had dared ask for. "You have done what governments could not," the chief said. "You have built hope. Take it." Construction began immediately. People brought wood, nails, even old windows. Some gave coins, others gave labor. The new Grace Academy rose slowly but surely, room by room, shaped by the hands it was meant to serve. On the day of the grand opening, the entire village turned out. Banners hung from trees. A local band played drums and flutes. Children wore bright Ankara uniforms sewn by community tailors. Femi stood at the front gate, holding a golden pair of scissors. Ada stood beside him, her hand gently resting on her stomach. She was expecting their first child. "This isn't just a school," Femi said as the ribbon fluttered to the ground. "It's a promise that no child will be left behind because they learn differently." The crowd cheered, and students poured through the new gates, their shoes dusting the freshly swept ground. Classrooms filled with laughter, learning, and life. Later that evening, under the stars, Femi sat with Ada, watching the lights flicker inside the new building. "You remember the boy who couldn't read?" he asked. She smiled. "I married the man who taught the world how." Femi closed his eyes, breathed in the peace, and whispered, "This is grace."